Hey, booktube, science fiction reads here with another edition of recent reads and book haul. I'm going to run through this one a little quicker than usual because I just finished filming this and realized the camera wasn't on. So that is irritating. So let's launch right in. Of the books I've read recently, only one was someone other than Leigh Brackett, and that was a Hal Clement collection, Natives of Space. This is 3 novellas. I've read some of his short stories before. Didn't love them, but I did like his Mission of Gravity novel. But I wasn't really getting on with the sequel to that, so I DNF'd it at the time. Three stories in here. They're all right. The one I liked the most was called Impediment from 1942. And it was about these like insectoid aliens that kind of look like butterflies. They're kind of fleeing a civil war on their own solar system, and they end up on Earth in the middle of nowhere in the forest. And they need some sort of element or something. I can't remember what the element was, but they're hoping to find it on Earth. And there's like this hunter out there, a human, comes across them. The whole story is kind of how do you learn to speak, to a totally different being with a different language, different ideas and all that. The insectoids are kind of telepathic, but they can't really make any sense of a human's mind. But over time, over many sessions talking to this human, the kind of leader gets to know this guy. They kind of get to speak. They can ask questions and answer, but they're not really talking back and forth. And the whole story is about the main character, the human, trying to decide if he can trust these creatures. Should he help them find what they need? Is that ethically right? Because he knows they're kind of fleeing from a war and they want to go back and re-engage. And he kind of gets the picture that these guys are kind of pirates. And should I help them? Should I help arm these guys when they could just come back and, wreak havoc on my own planet kind of thing? He eventually decides he trusts them. He's leading them to a professor he knows who can help them get what they need. But then the alien, during a conversation, kind of lets slip, just in the way he's speaking, that he wasn't entirely honest with this guy. And the human kind of realizes, you know what, I kind of thought we were connecting as 2 different species, but I think you're using me and I think your intentions are not so great, so I'm not going to help you. And he kind of rubs it in their faces and walks away. The whole idea being it took them so long to learn how to read his mind and speak to him that they just don't have time to go through all that again because they got to get back to their home system. It was okay. I like Hal Clement. I like his hard SF style. To me, he's kind of like Arthur C. Clarke, but not as good. So now we get on to the beginnings of my Leigh Brackett obsession. I recently read the best of Leigh Brackett. Loved it, specifically her solar system stories, which are all kind of in the same universe. They mostly all take place on Mars, Venus, or Mercury. I think some take place on Jupiter, yep. And I can't really remember if any take place on Earth, although I haven't read all of them yet. This was a good short story collection. Only one in here that is a repeat from the best of, which is The Last Days of Shandakor. But the highlight in this was probably Mars minus Bisha was a good story about a human doctor, or an Earth doctor who's on Mars. And this is early on in the kind of Earth making contact with Mars, and Martians don't really respect or trust Earthlings, but this guy's doing the best he can on the outskirts of a town, just there to help when he can. And this Martian girl of, I think, 7 years old is dropped off and just left because there's some sort of taboo about her and her nomad culture. Like, even the parents, they don't want her, they need to get rid of her. Don't want to kill her, but don't want her around. And this doctor has to try and solve this health mystery with this girl, and it ends tragically. And something I've come to realize, although I first read it in the foreword to the best of Leigh Brackett, was written by her husband, Edmund Hamilton, and he mentioned how a lot of times her protagonists are goal driven, or they reach a goal at the end of the story only to find that what they wanted didn't turn out exactly as they expected, or they got what they want but it wasn't quite right, and it often ends tragically, or her characters end up like emotionally distraught or suicidal, or sometimes even dead. And that just does not, I have not come across that a lot. So I'm really enjoying her stories, especially her protagonists in her short stories. They're really, really appealing characters. So then I read this double collection, People of the Talisman, as well as The Secret of Sinharat. Both of these were short stories in the magazine Planet Stories in like the 50s, maybe late 40s, but more likely early 50s. And they were just worked up, or reworked, expanded, and given new titles. People of the Talisman was really cool. These both include or feature her most well-known character, Eric John Stark, who's kind of like an invincible. He's kind of like Conan the Barbarian. Not that I've read any Conan, and he kind of like John Carter of Mars. Not that I've read any John Carter of Mars stuff, but he's that kind of archetype. Like he's big, strong. He can, get out of any situation. And they're good stories, but I found them not as good, and I found him not as appealing as her short story characters. They're almost always one-off characters. She's got very little time for character development, and yet they're always more developed than Eric John Stark. So I prefer her short stories, and I prefer her Eric John Stark stories, but still good. People of the Talisman was really cool, involved coming into contact with an ancient race on Mars that was actually not human, which was cool. The whole thing about her solar system is at some point in the very remote past, obviously humanity, or the precursor to humanity, was seeded on all the planets. And so humanity on all the planets in the solar system is, slightly different because they've evolved in different environments and stuff over many, many millennia. But now we're at a point where they've made contact with each other, but Mars is just so ancient and so on its last legs. It's just a dying planet with many dying cultures, and it's an awesome, awesome setting. The short stories are fantastic. The Secret of Sinharat was really good too. Involved not aliens, but an interesting offshoot of humanity, thought long dead, but they're not entirely gone. Very cool. I have another copy of this, which we'll see shortly. That was a nice double, really neat. This next one is a short novel, The Sword of Rhiannon. This was really good, and I'm so happy that I read a bunch of her short stories in the solar system setting first, because this takes place on Mars, but the main character is projected, I think, 1,000,000 years in the past, but I just pretended it was more like 100,000 to make it more realistic, at least in terms of like human development and stuff. Geologically, I guess it wouldn't make sense, but anyway, the main character ends up in the past of Mars, which is not something I expected, because all of her stories that take place on Mars, Mars is just ancient and just dying, and people are barely surviving in these cultures dotted all across the planet, different cultures and stuff, but nobody's really thriving. And this guy ends up in the past. He ends up sort of possibly possessed by an ancient god, but it's not really a god. Her stuff is really good science fantasy. It reads like fantasy, but it's science fiction in a fantasy setting. I don't want to say too much about it because there's really not a lot to the plot, but the main character and the consciousness of possibly a god, but possibly not, work together to sort of undo some wrongs that this god did in the past, kind of thing, and to set some things right. And it was really cool. So, is that the last thing I read? Yeah. I am currently reading another Leigh Brackett book, which is in my car, I guess, because I'm reading it at work. So, I don't have it here. It's The Big Jump. It's a novel about the first jump, or the first space travel outside of the solar system. It's not part of her solar system series or anything. It's a totally different reality, and so far it's pretty good. I'm annoyed I don't have it here, but let's just jump into the new books. I'm going to go through all the non-Leigh Brackett stuff, and then we got a bunch of Leigh Brackett to look at. But like I said, I'm going to do this quickly because I already filmed this, much to my frustration. I saw this in a recent video by the Sci-Fi Shed, I believe his channel name. Brian Aldiss. It's a short story collection, The Heirs of Earth. And I bought it for two reasons. I haven't read much Brian Aldiss, but I've liked what I've read. And just something about this retro cover art. I really, really like it. Let's see if we have a credit anywhere for it. No. No credit for the artwork that I can see, but I don't know, just something about it. Really cool with the planet in the background. I found a John Wyndham, which I have a couple of his books now, still haven't read anything by him. Rebirth. I probably read the synopsis, but I couldn't tell you what it is now, but this is really, really cool vintage edition. I believe this is from 1965. I got another Larry Niven, Jerry Pournelle, Oath of Fealty, which has a really, for like the 80s, like a thriller, like a mainstream book look, you know? I bought it because it's like in great shape. I think, yeah, there's a bit of crack into the spine, but it's in great condition. So that'll go to the ever-growing collection of Larry Niven books. I didn't realize that this was a sequel, even though it says right on the front. This is a Vonda McIntyre Metaphase, which is the sequel to Transition. I read the synopsis, sounded neat. I think there's kind of like a galactic society of different species, but there's only two species they shun. These weird, like, eyeball-looking aliens and humanity. So those two species need to team up for some reason. I can't remember now. I read the synopsis. It sounds good. I think the only McIntyre I've read was Dream Snake, which I remember not really enjoying, but then as time went on, I kind of regretted getting rid of it because it was actually pretty good. It won the Hugo or the Nebula. I can't remember which, but it wasn't bad. Poul Anderson that I bought just because it's in great shape. The Avatar. I don't have it. That helps, but it's also in nice shape, and it's heavy for an old paperback. Don't know what it's about. I did it one time. It wasn't that long ago. I was reading about this one on Wikipedia or somewhere, but it looks wild. And I've got a decently growing collection of his paperbacks as well. And then an Elsbreg de Camp, someone I've never read, The Hostage of Zur. I just bought this because I'm currently loving the Leigh Brackett stuff, and this just has some science fantasy vibes going on. Great cover art. It's a book club edition. I think it's like a science fantasy kind of barbarian type thing by the looks of it. Will I ever read it? Who knows? And two randoms here. I love me some Peanuts, so I got these kind of... I've never seen these before. They're kind of like ace doubles in a way. You flip them over, you can read more. I've been reading Peanuts my whole life. I've probably read all of them at this point, but I pick books up when I can if they're cheap. And okay, so we've already seen a few of the new Leigh Bracketts because I bought just a big lot off of eBay. But I showed this earlier. This Ace Double was actually later released in the, let's see, 70s or 80s? Probably, yeah, 1982. They were bound up again and released as Eric John Stark, Outlaw of Mars. And it's just the same two novellas. I like that it's the same type of, same scene was used, just drawn differently, painted differently. There's the first scene from the story. It's not really relevant to the story at all. It's just the very first the first 2 pages, he's riding across the desert on a lizard thing, which never features again. But yeah, those were good stories. That was the only case of 2 copies of the same book in this lot that I bought. Next up, The Starman of Lyrides, which I don't believe is part of her solar system series. I think it's like a random guy who finds out his heritage is not what he thought, and he's bound for the stars type thing, possibly. Somebody recently was talking about this in a Facebook group. I might check this out sooner than later. Then I have The Nemesis from Terra, which I think was previously called something else, something with Mars in the title, but I can't remember now. This one, I don't think this is part of... oh, never mind. This looks like it probably is part of her expanded solar system series, which I am loving so much. Not series, but shared universe kind of thing. These, I hope I don't mind these. This is more Eric John Stark. I think pretty much the last stuff she wrote in the solar system stuff, well, that's debatable, was the trilogy, the Scathe trilogy, which features Eric John Stark, but of course, at this point, she moved that character to a totally different solar system to comply with, at the time, modern science, which, you know, at this point, probes have landed on various planets. Like NASA had put a couple of things on Mars and stuff, and so her older pulpy stories weren't really what I think publishers wanted, so she just took her main character, put him in another solar system, and the result was this trilogy: The Ginger Star, The Hounds of Scathe, great cover art too, and The Reavers of Scathe. And I've deliberately not really read up much on what this is about. I'm already not totally loving the Eric John Stark character, so I'd rather go in blind and try to enjoy it as best I can, but I probably won't read it for a little while. Alpha Centauri or Die, another short novel of hers, which just involves, you know, traveling to the nearest star and trying to get there alive. Again, excellent cover art. These are all, you know, not great condition, but all the spines are not too bad. I'm really pleased with these. And then one of her best known, I'm really excited to read this post-apocalypse novel, The Long Tomorrow, where the people best suited to survive after the fall of society are like the Amish or the Mennonites. And really cool premise where there's strict rules for society. Society is very simple now. There's not a lot of tech, but there's rumors of somewhere far away where science is being done again. And I think the main characters want to go there or something. That's really cool. Again, I deliberately have not read up much on this because it's a classic and I'm probably going to love it because I'm really enjoying her stuff, so I want to go in pretty much blind. That was it from the Leigh Brackett lot that I bought on eBay, but I just had a very special book come in today. This was published in the early 2000s by Hafner Press, and around that time they published 4 collections of Leigh Brackett's. These are rare. They're not rare. This is one of 1,000, and presumably the others are also one of 1,000. But these are expensive as hell. I bought the cheapest one, which is Shannock the Last, Farewell to Mars. So this is a bind-up of her, you know, solar system stories. Not all of them, because there's, like I said, 3 other collections of her stuff that Hafner Press put out, but they're all over like $150 into the $200, even $300, and I'm not going to be able to afford those. This is hard to find for under 80. I found it for I think 45 Canadian shipped, which I was shocked that there's no pictures, and I'm shocked it's actually in basically mint condition, really nice and wrapped up. The title's kind of weird because if I remember right, Shannock the Last is a story that takes place on Mercury, and the subtitle to the whole collection is Farewell to Mars, just because this is the last stories she wrote, I believe, in the solar system universe. So kind of a weird title, but it's got an introduction by Anne McCaffrey. At the very end, there's a Q&A that she did in 1975, and it's like 20 pages. Somebody transcribed it, so that's cool. I look forward to reading that. It's got tons of stories here. I think I've read 8 out of what's probably, there's probably 15 or 20 in here. Really cool end papers. So I'm very excited about this. This is likely what I'll read next after The Big Jump, unless I'm kind of getting sick of Leigh Brackett stuff. Although I'm toying with the idea of saving some of these stories because I'm loving them so much, and I have a habit of when I find an author I like, I just blaze through all their stuff. Like, what's his name there? Robert Charles Wilson. Like, I've read all his stuff practically now. So there's not much of his I have left to look forward to, which is frustrating, but I can't help myself. But I'm really loving this stuff. Probably I'll read it next, but this is one of my new favorite books. Really looking forward to it. And that's it for now. I keep saying there's not going to be much new books, and then stuff keeps happening. But yeah, thanks for watching as always, and see you next time.